Hi guys. So today I want to talk to you about programming and specifically why I think programming is super important when it comes to skill acquisition in aerial. My name is Verity. I am an online aerial coach and I specialize in strength and conditioning and helping my clients to achieve the skills that matter to them. So we're going to talk about what programming even is, why it's so important, and then I'm going to share a little bit about my approach to programming specifically for skill acquisition in aerial so that you can at least have a few ideas of how you can maybe adjust some of your training so that it can be a little bit more effective in helping you with your goals. So what is programming? Well, it's basically the steps that you take within a training session that will help you to achieve goals. And it's doing this enough times over a long enough period to actually reach those goals. So it's the exact exercises, the exact progressions, the exact sets, reps, rest, and time that you do in your workouts or in your aerial sessions that are normally planned in advance if you're following an actual program, either one that you've put together yourself or that's been designed for you. And I think the reason that this can be overlooked as something that's very important when it comes to training in aerial is because for a lot of us, and this was myself included as well, we all start out by going to classes. And when we're going to classes, we might be doing like different classes each week. We might have different teachers depending on whether somebody's off sick or on holiday. And so there might not be a lot of consistency through the classes. So it might be that if you're going to a hoop class and every week you're working on like new shapes and new poses, and maybe the conditioning is just like very general, just for building a bit of strength and a bit of body control, but there isn't a lot of like continuity from class to class, or there isn't a lot of working on the same drills for long enough to really get any benefit from them. One of the things with aerial is you can get away with that for a length of time, but it will only get you so far. There'll come a point where you hit a plateau or you're trying to work towards a harder skill and it just feels like nothing is happening. Like you can't figure out how to get from A to B. And the thing that bridges that gap is specific, intentional, tailored programming. And so here's a really nice way to think about this. If you were going to build a house, you would check the ground and you would lay the foundations and then you would build on top of sturdy foundations, right? And there's a very specific order in doing that to basically get it right. And I think of skills a little bit like building a house. You wouldn't just find a piece of land and then start building a wall, right? Like you haven't laid any foundations, you haven't put any groundwork in, and you've kind of skipped ahead a bunch of steps. And so what's probably going to happen is that wall will fall down. In aerial, I see a lot of people, they want to do a skill like an invert or a meat hook are really good examples. And the approach is just to keep trying, like keep throwing yourself at it, just keep trying to do it, and you're just missing all of the steps that will get you there more quickly and more easily, like training the movement pathway, building strength in different parts of the body, like really understanding what the skill is, where your strength limitations are in relation to the skill, and then working on those to then be able to successfully achieve the skill. And so programming is literally the thing that can give you that result. It bridges that gap from where you are to where you want to be. There are also a number of reasons why it's important. So I talk about progressive programming a lot, and that phrase literally just means you are progressively, so slowly and carefully building your strength, building your body control, building your flexibility at a rate that is not going to cause overtraining or injury, and that is going to give you that incremental step-by-step progress in order to get to the harder skill. And obviously, the harder the skill is, the more complex and the slower that process can be. And therefore, the more important it is to really get those steps right, to really make sure that your body has the capacity to even be training the progressions for those harder skills. So programming can help with avoiding injury. It can help with avoiding overtraining, because oftentimes, and especially when I program for clients, you have your training sessions laid out, and if it's done well, it's done in a way where you're not overworking your body within each session, because each session takes into consideration everything else that's happening within the week and over the course of a month. And so simply by following that programming, you can make sure that you're not doing too much or too little, because that's also the other side of it, is not training enough of what you need consistently over a long enough period of time. And then strength gains are actually made through rest and recovery, right? So it's the time that is not spent on the equipment, it's the time that is spent sleeping, eating, resting, going for a walk, gentle movement, but not full on training. The program should also take that into consideration and look at, when are you going to have recovery time from one session to the next, and how long is that, and what does that involve? And so these are all things that I take into consideration when I am building out and designing programs for clients. So I'm going to share a little bit about the way that I approach this for aerialists and for my clients. This is based off of years of experience of learning and understanding and putting this into practice when it comes to building out tailored, individualized programs. The way that I will always start a program is with a warm-up. It sounds obvious, but there are aerialists that skip warm-ups. And I really prefer that my clients do warm-up. I don't tend to make the warm-up particularly strenuous. I use that for joint prep and muscle activation. It's very much mobilizing the joints, starting to switch on some of the muscles that we're going to be using for the skill work. So it is specific to what's in the training session. The other thing that I think warm-ups are really useful for are assessing where you're currently at. So we all know aerial can be very physically demanding. We all know it's possible to overdo it and end up feeling sore. If you're in a situation where your body is sore, but you've got to get another training session in, the warm-up is a really good way to assess how you're feeling, what's sore, what feels tight, and then you can choose to spend a little bit more extra time on whichever part of your body needs it, just getting it ready for that session. This is such a good way to prevent injury. I cannot stress this enough. If you really check in with your body in the first 10 to 15 minutes of your session with gentle movement, you can just be so much better prepared for the skill work and the strength training itself. I also really love using locomotion as part of the warm-up. So this is crawling. It tends to involve being on all fours on the floor. Some of my clients love it, some of my clients really don't. But for the people that do enjoy it, I will always include it, because it's a way of starting to progressively load your body in preparation for fully loading it in the skill work. It is also a way to get your heart rate up if you are somebody that likes that in the warm-up. But again, that's something that I will let my clients choose. I don't necessarily think that you have to, run a marathon to warm up for aerial. And also for skill work, we just don't use our cardiovascular system in the same way. So again, this is why I am more about preparing the body for that skill training, rather than just doing some kind of generic warm up where we're only increasing our heart rate and body temperature. The next thing that I like to do is put skill work into the training session, and this can be seen as a bit controversial. I know a lot of coaches like to put conditioning in after the warm up. The reason that I choose to do skill work before conditioning is because I always want mine or my client's nervous system to be as fresh as possible for the more technical movements. So I don't see a lot of value in exhausting yourself with conditioning if you've then got to do movements that require a lot of concentration and a lot of nervous system stress. What I will do for skill work is put drills that prep you for that skill work. So let's say we're working on inverts, because honestly, I don't think I've worked with a single client who hasn't included inverts as one of their main goals. So it's something that I am always programming for people. Negatives are super useful for inverts. The majority of my clients will work on those, but it can be it's quite a full-on skill. It's a full body exercise in itself. It takes a lot of effort. So I will never put that first for the skill work. I will pick apart the invert and I will use movements that are working on individual parts of the invert to start to get the body more prepared for those harder skill drills. So that's my approach with skill work. So you're not going to go from a mobility warm up to a really hard exercise. There will be steps in between, but I like to make sure that these movements are like more technical, so they require more mental as well as physical effort, so I will put those first. The other thing with skill work is that I like to keep the sets and reps low and have adequate rest between attempts. So the focus is always going to be on quality over quantity. And this is how I differentiate between skill work and conditioning as well. So conditioning is always done at a higher intensity. So the movements tend to be slightly less technical. They're still movements that support the bigger goals, but they will be something that can be done while maintaining good form at a higher intensity. So this leads us nicely onto conditioning. And conditioning, like I said, is slightly higher intensity, or it can be much higher intensity if you just want to train it in that way. But exercises that are slightly lower from a skill standpoint so that you can still maintain form while doing them at a higher intensity. I like to do conditioning as circuits or supersets or trisets, and this just means that you're doing one exercise after the other without rest. So those formats can work really well. And again, they will still be exercises that support the main goal, the main skill. So, if we're thinking about inverts again, things like seated leg lifts are super good because they are challenging, but they are not as technical as some of the hanging drills. Or if leg strength is a goal, leg exercises can be super good to put into conditioning because, again, something like a squat, obviously we want to do it with good form, but it's a bit less technical. If you are working on building pulling strength, then more simple pulling exercises like ring rows or assisted pull-ups might go into the conditioning. So this is the way that I do this. I like to have this after the skill training, so you're getting that high intensity, kind of workout feeling, but it hasn't impacted the more technical stuff that needs more mental effort. And then the next section that I would include is a cool down. And this is basically not necessarily stretches that are going to help you with big flexibility goals, although it can be, but more stretches to tell your nervous system it's time to switch off from training and it's time to finish. Stretches that help with avoiding muscle soreness. Stretches that just keep you feeling kind of mobile and good, basically. For really targeted flexibility work, I would actually include that in the skill training. Or it would be its own session. So one of the things that I'm really hoping with this video is that you can see that there is always a reason behind why I do certain things, why I program the way that I do. I can always give a proper explanation of why training is in this order and why these different movements are included. And I really want to enforce the intention behind this and how thought out and deliberate tailored programming actually is. And so if you are finding that you are only going to classes right now, or you are doing some of your own training, but it's kind of what you feel like, and it's different movements each training session, if there's not a lot of consistency and continuity with what you're doing, and you're finding that you're not really making the progress that you want, this is going to be part of the reason why. This is not to say that unstructured training doesn't have value. I go through phases where I don't want to look at a program for myself and I want to go to training sessions with no plan just to see what happens. But that has its place when you don't have really big goals, right? If you're somebody who is like, I really want to get my invert this year. I really want to get my meat hook. I really want to get my Aisha. I really want to get my front splits. The most effective way to achieve these goals is by working on the right drills that your body needs over a long enough period of time consistently. And so programming is the cheat. We're always talking about, oh, that one hack to get stronger more quickly. And it's not really a hack, but it is the most effective way and the most time efficient way to achieve your goals is to follow programming. So my tips for today are: reassess your goals if you're not sure what they are, or you want your training to become a little bit more focused. And then maybe have a think about some of the drills that you might need. And then think about structuring your sessions a little bit more. So start with a warm up that prepares your body for the skills, train the skills themselves, and give them enough time and attention and energy. Work on conditioning so that you're building more strength, more flexibility specific to your skill goals. And then make sure you do a cool down, because even though it can feel like a pain, it's really good for your body. And see how that changes over time. And if you need help, you can always book a call with me and see if my coaching program is a good fit for you. So I hope that was helpful. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.